Well, this is an exciting day for me. Any day I get to wear my pitch black t-shirt is a good day. And just before we get started with our conversation with Stephen Green, which I know is going to engage you, you will not be able to look away from this. He's such a captivating thinker and speaker. I want to let you know that we owe some thanks to Joanne from Space for helping us with captions this morning. Space is an innovative Portland-based nonprofit with the mission of making arts and cultural events accessible and inclusive to the deaf and hard of hearing. And I'm very happy to support them and happy for their help in making this live stream accessible. So thank you, Space, and thank you to our captioner this morning. Speaking of inclusion, you know, I would love to include you in this conversation. If you're watching live, feel free to join the conversation this morning by commenting on this video. Your comments will come straight to the team, and I'll try to incorporate your questions into the conversation as time allows. You know, you can always follow up with us on our various social media too, and Stephen will let you know how you can get in touch with him if you want to help support some of his projects. But if you're watching later or listening to the podcast, don't hesitate to email us at ourportland@sarah2020.com. So without further ado, Stephen Green is here with us today, and I'm so excited to have him on the Our Portland podcast. He's someone I've learned so much from about Portland, especially when it comes to how we build the relationships that sustain us as a community and sustain us as an economy. Stephen describes himself as a Latino economist, speaker, and recovering banker venture capitalist. He's the director of operations at Pencil Academy. Spreadsheets are my superpower, says Stephen, and sneakers are my kryptonite. Stephen's an economist, a small business advocate, founder of the event Pitch Black, and organizer of the Do More, Do Better movement that we are going to talk a little about today. Well, good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Sarah. Always nice to see you.
So you launched this project last week.
Yeah.
You, Juan Barraza, Rick Tarosi, Mitch Doherty, you're going to provide a starting point for individuals who want to enact change within their organizations, but may not see a path to doing so. Why did you think this was necessary? What are you working on?
Yeah, so I think the moments of the last 4 months in particular have given some clarity to the work that's needed, but particularly since Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, those events, I've had a lot of amazing conversations with allies, accomplices, friends, acquaintances, people I've never met before. And I think everyone, particularly white Americans, have been kind of shook to their core of what do I do? I feel uncomfortable. I feel there's something going on here. And I think the genesis of Do More is really, you know, how do we start those conversations and really root those conversations and also taking actions that really center the experiences of Black folks. And so when you read Do More, the reason why it's really a movement is it's all really rooted in action. And I think it's really important that folks understand that little pieces, little steps, those things really matter, as long as they're done around centering the experiences of other folks. And so the movement is kind of a rock into the water to create some swells, create some really great conversations. And, you know, in just the first 4 days that it's been out there, we had folks from over 200 companies sign up to do it. And it's been amazing to hear the responses and also get questions and feedback on it. At the end of the day, it's, you know, we've tried a number of top-down approaches. And this approach is definitely bottom-up. What would it look like to empower employees at organizations and firms to really start, you know, not only holding their companies accountable, but also being able to have a rubric to use to engage and talk about, you know, what the work is for them and where they're at right now.
So you and I had a little back and forth on Twitter because I first saw this, and
Yeah.
I said, hey, everybody sign this pledge. And you said, Sarah, it's not a pledge.
Yeah.
It's not a pledge. And it makes me think about the tech pledge, which in some ways, you and I have had multiple conversations over years now, it feels like,
Yeah.
about things like the tech pledge and why it's important that this isn't a pledge. And maybe tell us, for those who don't know, what is the tech pledge and why would we maybe find that unsuccessful as a mechanism for achieving equity and inclusion in our economy here in Portland?
Yeah, so the Tech Pledge is an effort that the city and a number of folks kind of brought together back in 2015 to start looking at really having conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I think is definitely working about it is brought in a group of people together to have conversations around DEI, what it means, that otherwise probably wouldn't have happened. But as I mentioned earlier, I really come from a standpoint of I want my work to be centered around impact and the experiences of people that I want to see be impacted. And so I think from my perspective of why it hasn't worked is when you look at the metrics, particularly around Black employees, it went backwards after years of doing the work and the commitment. And so from my standpoint, I feel like, especially in the moment that we're in, Portland is always a very progressive, nice place. People know they need to have a Black Lives Matter sign, but they've never really until this point gotten to a point of saying, I need to do things that show Black lives actually matter. And I think that's a pivot that's happening now, whether it be the Tech Pledge conversations that are happening right now or other efforts. I think people finally kind of understand that my intentions and my comfort shouldn't be the things that are centered in this work. And that if we're really going to make change, one of the things that startup founders talk about so often is you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And we get that when we talk about growing a business. But when it comes to race, gender, identities, those are the things that apparently only get better if we don't talk about them and we remain comfortable. And so this is an effort to really center those experiences of other folks and do the work that way and really be able to open up more voices from the bottom up to keep people uncomfortable. Because I think that's, it took us 400 years to get where we're at with the system of oppression around, Black Americans. I don't think we're going to get out of it being comfortable and nice to one another over the next few quarters. So this is a real commitment to being uncomfortable to really evoke change.
And this discomfort, and I don't even want to say leaning into it, but just owning it maybe. I know you have some strong thoughts on what you think the city of Portland should be doing and some of the major institutions that make up our political landscape, if you will. But what, in shorthand, because we could probably go on all day, like what are the top 5 things that the next mayor of Portland needs to be thinking about so that this whole we're not a pledge, this is a movement, we're going to get this uncomfortable and stay uncomfortable? Like what kind of uncomfortable space does the next mayor and city council of Portland need to occupy in this work, do you think, from your perspective?
Yeah, I hope all of our leaders, public sector, not public sector, they really understand the immense importance of relationships and communication and, the ideas of the old playbooks of having gatekeepers and keeping people at bay isn't going to work moving forward. And so, I would hope that before our leaders do, transactions or press releases or press events, they would go and really ask themselves the hard questions about, am I cultivating relationships in community authentically? And am I centering it around the things that people in the community want, or am I centering it about the things that I want and that I'm comfortable with? And how do you do that ongoing, right? This is, cultivating these relationships is about remaining curious. I've always said that, outreach is a dirty word. It's something you do to someone. A relationship is something you do with someone. And so from a high level, I think it's about reframing how we look at who our stakeholders are, how we engage with them, how we break bread with them, and ultimately, how are we leveraging our own privilege to ensure a better tomorrow for the folks that we want to see impacted. I think, me being a lover of demography and data, oftentimes you'll hear people say a rising tide lifts all boats. When you look at the data, that's actually not true at all. Over the biggest economic boom in Oregon's history, every community saw a raise from 2000 to 2017 when it came to income, except one community in Oregon, and that's Black Oregonians. And so you can't sit back and say, well, everyone was doing good. These people were doing good, so everyone's doing good. That's just not the case. And so we have to be able to call out the things and call into question and have difficult discussions around, all right, why does this group seem to be left behind? Why is this neighborhood not picking up on the prosperity that's happening throughout our city or our state? And that only can start with having tough conversations and leaning into those things. And I think we know from our personal relationships that, when times are tough, that's when people really come together, right? Like it's easy to be married or have a boyfriend or girlfriend when times are good. But when times are tough, that's where you really cement relationships and are your authentic self.
You talked a little bit about data and being a wonk there. And I do want to talk a little bit about metrics, because when it comes right down to it, what you measure is what you'll get. And what aren't we measuring that we need to be measuring so that we know that we're actually in this work? And what are the consequences when you decide to measure something and you don't achieve it?
A friend of mine, Stephanie Gostin, recently introduced me to something called the liberatory consciousness. And it's a framework created by Dr. Barbara Love. And she looks at the fact that we all are trying to function in a system of racism. You, myself, we're all functioning inside of that. And in order to make change happen inside of that racist system, we have to be able to do it from the standpoint of three places. The first one is awareness. The second one is analysis. The third one is accountability. The third one is action, and the fourth one is accountability. And you have to be able to do all four of those in order to really evoke change. And so, one of the things that I think is missing is when it comes to issues around race, when it comes to issues around houselessness, oftentimes, people, are abrupt around their awareness and they want a knee-jerk response go into action, but there's not a lot of analysis that's done. And when it comes to accountability, I think we've kind of gotten to a point where people call that cancel culture or calling out, as opposed to, no, if you put something out there into the public realm saying I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and you do that publicly and do a press release, I think it's completely fair game for someone to go and say, hey, last month you said X, Y, and Z, help me understand how what you did this month connects with that. And how do we have a conversation about that? Because, I believe we're all trying to build trust with the communities that we engage in. And I believe in a thing called the trust bucket, and you're either putting things into the trust bucket or you're taking things out. And the actions that we take, the words that we use, all play into that. And so, yes, the work is long in reach, and the arch of it is generational. But there's opportunities in every moment, in every day, in every week, and every month to really make deposits into the trust bucket. So
yeah, deposits in that trust bucket. Well, there was someone whose trust bucket was overdrawn with you last week. And I saw some interesting conversations underway with regard to the Portland Business Alliance and their claims to be focused on DEI outcomes, improving those, at the meanwhile announcing a new executive board that didn't have any Black Portlanders on it. Yeah. And there was some really heated discussion across a lot of platforms for a couple of weeks now. in terms of what does this really mean for Portland? I mean, these are the power brokers, right? These are the influencers. These are the shapers in many ways, not necessarily culture shapers, but commerce shapers. They show up and they serve on boards, and they're in the right rooms, and they rub elbows when we're not under shelter in place with the right people. So what's that all about? What's the kind of conversation, if it were happening ideally, how would these conversations unfold?
Yeah. So, I think, for me, I saw a press release in June and then another press release in July, and they didn't necessarily connect up in this moment that I thought we were in. And I have some great friends that are on the PBA board and doing amazing work. And so I put that out into the social media world for a conversation. And a lot of people had a lot of comments about it.
Yeah, they did.
I think for me, I think I'm reading the tea leaves right in that it's okay to say Black people, and it's okay to talk authentically about the relationships we do or don't have in the Black community, whether it be myself, organizations like Built Oregon that I'm on, or even the Portland Business Alliance. And I think we are doing all of ourselves justice by having those conversations and doing them publicly, and looking at where are those opportunities to cultivate trust and make deposits in the trust bucket, and also be able to talk about, is my action here a withdrawal from the trust bucket when it comes to the community. And so, I've had a chance to not only see the social media conversation that was happening there, but also talk to a number of board members from PBA. And, I believe they're super authentic in their work. But also, accountability matters, analysis matters, action matters, and being really, really urgent about that. You know me, like I'm somebody that's always thinking about, what am I doing this week to cultivate trust in the communities that I hope to support. And I feel a sense of urgency around that. And I think one of the ways that sense of urgency, manifests itself is asking other people about why aren't they that seemingly that urgent. And I know this stuff takes time, but I'm going to continue to have conversations, whether it be the PBAs of the world or whoever, when it comes to the communities that I really feel are underestimated and untapped when it comes to getting support from all different types of leadership.
I think it comes down a lot to it doesn't matter where I go to meet you, right? If I go out to Woodlawn, if I go to Deadstock to catch up with you, everyone says, "Hey, Stephen," right? It's like you're the mayor of 3 or 4 different neighborhoods at least. I don't even know how you do that. But in some way, there's a reason that moniker comes up. Someone's the mayor of such and such, right? Because being the mayor of such and such doesn't mean that you have all the power to affect change. It's more that who knows what everybody's doing, and who's doing the good stuff, and maybe who's not doing some of the not so good, who's doing some of the not so good stuff. And how do you try to mitigate the harm and risk and amplify the benefits that accrue to people? And I see you doing that in your community so much. So I think that's probably why people appreciate you and give you that nickname, is by virtue of just the intense amount of work you do all over the city, building those relationships and investing in those relationships, so that when it comes right down to it, you have the credibility to call for accountability from some of these organizations and institutions when they don't step up, because you've put in that work too. And that's not always accounted for, I don't think, when people are looking at how are we going to learn and grow. It's through showing up time and again that you've been able to accomplish this in Portland in some ways. So I want to thank you for that foremost, but also ask you, like, what lessons do you have perhaps for younger generations or people who are new to this work from your longevity here and your staying power and your ability to have such reach and depth in our community?
I'm a firm believer in done beats perfect. Working with entrepreneurs for the last 20 years, I've come to understand a couple truths. And one of those truths is, putting something out there, hanging out a shingle, putting out your website, is 90% of what other people won't do. aren't willing to do when it comes to putting something out there and putting an idea out to the public. And so, I think that that urgency of just being able to show up, even if it's imperfectly, I think that's one of the reasons why, I tend to be always in community and engage in that, because I got people's back and I'm immensely curious, and I like to learn on the fly and argue with people, to change my point and better understand their point. But it's definitely something that I learned from my folks. Growing up here, Portland is my favorite city. I'll be buried here. I love traveling a ton, but the more I travel, the more I love Portland, and I know the more I love the zero point 0.3 degrees of separation that there seems to be, particularly in the business world here. But in growing up here, I remember in the mid 80s, there were some climbers that went missing on Mount Hood, and I'm the youngest of 5 boys, and was always fighting for time with my dad. And when those climbers went missing, a couple of teachers from my school were actually part of the group that was missing. And my dad came home and he packed his duffel bag, and then he was getting ready to go out the door. And I was like, "Well, where are you going? I thought we were gonna hang out." And he said, "Those climbers are missing on Mount Hood. I'm going to go up there and look for them." And I was crushed. I mean, I was 11, and all I could think about was myself, of course. And my dad in that moment said, in order for people to be found, someone has to be looking for them, right? And so the only way they're gonna find it safely out of there is most likely is if me and a bunch of other people are looking. And I think of the community work that I do in really that statement, like, I'm out there looking for people because I know they exist, because I know they need to be found. And I think so often when it comes to work around diversity in tech or Black businesses, it comes from the standpoint of people don't assume they exist, or go, it's okay just to know Stephen or Ian or whatever, versus the more than 4,000 Black businesses that we have in Portland. And so that constant light is inside of me of really looking for folks and hearing their story and hearing what took them to where they are today, and why the heck would they want to run for mayor, or but there's a story to that. There's a journey, and then when you hear that, it's like, oh, of course Sarah's running for mayor, because I understand her journey now. And I like to have those intersections along the way and be able to support people. And sometimes supporting people is writing a check. Sometimes supporting people is just saying, like, you can do it. Like, you're perfectly made to do this, and I want to support you.
Well, how can people, before we get off our stream today,
Yeah.
how can people support you in this moment? I've got my pitch black shirt on for those who don't, who can't see at home.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this on audio podcast, folks, I apologize, but I know you've got so many projects in the hopper. What can they do to make sure that these are successful and that you're successful?
Yeah, go to www.iwilldomore.org to learn more about what do more, do better is, and see if it resonates with you. It's seemed to resonate with almost 400 people in just the first few days, from companies all over the region and even all over the country. And then second, working on a virtual pitch black. I really think now is a time to lean in on stories even more, and talk about the amazing folks that are in our midst that have been changing things up since COVID. And there's so many amazing stories. And so I'm really excited about that. Going to be working with Juan Barraza, the founder of Pitch Latino, and doing a co-effort to highlight Black and Latinx founders from around the country. And so be on the lookout on my social media for more information about that. But go check out do more, do better at www.iwilldomore.org.
And you want you want heavy hitters on here. You want people who are company owners, who are CEOs. You want to bring big boats along on this.
That would be nice, but I also think that the work oftentimes happens at the people at the on the first floor, the people that aren't in the penthouse or the C-suite. because they're the ones that are having conversations with customers and also the C-suite folks. I think for folks in the C-suite, they have a lot of other concerns that they have to navigate in looking at doing this work. And oftentimes, I think that the best person to deliver how to do this work at a company is the employees that are underneath them, because they have a lot more context than someone like myself would from the outside. And so, my hope is that people reading about the commitment and signing on are the folks that are the everyday employees, the middle managers, the people that see the issues and the opportunity around DEI up close and personal. Because I think oftentimes the leadership team is a little bit more removed, but it's those folks that are on the ground working in the warehouse where they're having a conversation at the the water cooler about, man, if we could just tap into this community, or we never see folks from this neighborhood apply for jobs where we're at. I think those are the folks that are best positioned to help the leadership team navigate how to do it. And I think the website that we put together gives a great starting point and a rubric for how folks can start taking action to cultivating some more authentic relationships and trust, particularly with the Black community.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad there's space for everybody. And I told you I had a surprise for you. So you ready? I'm gonna send this to you in the mail, because this is perfectly coordinated to go with your pitch black outfit whenever you wear that one. And you don't always have to have it out. But we got custom masks made that say "Wearing is caring." So we're gonna send you this one right now.
Hey,
when I get off here, I'll drop it in the mail, and I'll drop a couple in for the rest of the family too, since we're all stuck at home, and you can wear them inside or outside depending on if you want to be a walking billboard or not. But thank you so much for everything you do in the community, and thank you for the amount of time you spend educating and uplifting me in particular. I learn so much from you every time I talk, and it makes me a better Portlander on the other side of the conversation. So thanks so much for all you invest in me and our community. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah, for the time. I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you later on the podcast. It'll be out next week. So if you want to listen again, come back for more. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.